Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Brian Hunt. Brian is the president and CEO of Southern Champion Tray. Brian is the first non-family member to lead the longtime Chattanooga company. Brian, before we discuss how someone on a Fortune 500 track leaves corporate life in Boston to join a comparatively small family business, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
You know, I had a little Brazilian coffee this morning, actually fresh brew, and I wanted to make sure that I had a cup before the tariffs took over and made it too expensive to afford. So that's what I started with this morning.
How do you drink it? Black, sugar,
little cream.
Little cream?
Just a little cream.
How many you get in you before you get in the office?
2 good cups. Probably if you measure them, might be 4, because it's a pretty big mug, but it's really 2.
You drink them through the day, or you get off the couch?
Yep. I start the morning, have my 2 cups, watch some CNBC, Squawk Box, and then I'm on my way.
Well, that's a great way to start today. And I want to talk first about yourself, and then we'll get into Southern Champion Tray. Born in Rome, Georgia.
Yeah, I would say I was born in Rome. I think that's always impressive when you say that to people. Then I have to say Rome, Georgia. But born in Rome, Georgia. Spent my first 10 years in Summerville, Georgia, or as people around this area, they call it Sumville.
Sumville.
And this is a great upbringing. You know, the first 10 years of my life was there. We lived in a very small home, very humble beginnings. In fact, the home's still there today. It's about 800 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And so, you know, it's 5 of us in the family. And
wow.
That's how we got our start.
So close family.
Yeah, very close family. In fact, we were on the same property with my grandparents, and my grandparents lived next door. So it was a great upbringing. I had no idea it was humble beginnings until later in life you look back, and it's kind of like a wow factor of how did I get where I am today from where to start.
Well, I know you had a lot of influences even before you moved to Dalton. And one of the things you told me about was as a kid collecting and redeeming Coke bottles and your grandfather taking you to the bank. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So growing up next to my grandparents has provided a real unique opportunity. Both my parents worked, both my grandparents worked. And certainly, you know, there were babysitters involved. We were never left at home without. So, but my grandfather really instilled some hard work thoughts in me, and as well as my parents. But we had a garden, had apple trees, so I'd pick apples, help in the garden. But early on, I started finding out that you could pick up Coke bottles, and back then you could take them back, and you could get a nickel per Coke bottle. In some cases, a dime. So, and I can't imagine my parents left me alone on a bicycle to ride through the neighborhoods, picking up bottles out of the ditches, but that's what I would do. And then my grandfather, after we would do that, take the money, he would take me to the bank. And back then they had passbook savings accounts.
Yeah.
And so you took your money to the bank and they would write it down in a book. And then you would come back. I think interest at the time, who knows, was probably 7-8%. And you would come back and they'd write the interest in the book. And so, you know, every month. And so it really taught me something about saving.
Yes. So do you remember what that first deposit was?
You know, I don't. I'm sure there's probably some silver dollars because my grandfather gave me silver dollars for working. And I've looked back, hindsight, probably should have kept those, shouldn't have deposited them. But that's what I did.
The other thing you told me while you were still in Somerville, that faith was big in your family, but you were only, a quarter mile from the church you attended?
Yeah, in fact, about a crow's flies, you'd probably say a few hundred yards. But it was a small church, North Somerville Baptist, and my family, my grandparents, and we had other family members who were members there. And then at an early age, and I didn't realize this when I was young, but my grandfather had only had a 3rd grade education, and it was people of the church that spent time teaching him how to read and how to do bookkeeping, which later led to his career in running service stations for K Oil and Supreme Oil Company. And, it was prosperous for him enough to be able to buy some rental property and do things, but it was the church, and it was that family of the church that really helped him get his start.
Sounds like your grandfather was a pretty big influence on you.
He was. He died very young. So, in fact, I have outlived my grandfather, but yeah, at a young age, at least up until my teen years, very much involved. And I think he died when I was 13.
How about siblings? You have siblings?
I do. I have a brother and a sister, and both very successful as well. My brother's a surgeon in Utah, and my sister, she works in the accounting arena in Dalton, and in fact, lives up here in Chattanooga now.
And speaking of Dalton, when you were 10, you moved to Dalton.
Yeah, 10 years old, moved to Dalton. And for those of you that have moved as a child, that can be quite traumatic. And I'd say that what was really helped me along in the move is I played team sports growing up. And so when I moved, got involved immediately, baseball and then football and basketball and you name it. If it had a ball associated with it, I was involved. And so that helped the move and the transition to Dalton.
So you were staying busy with each season having a different team sport. And as you said, really helps the transition because you have a ready-made set of friends with your teammates.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to assimilate as much. But what else did team sports teach you that you take today that particularly when you're looking at hiring someone?
Yeah, so for me, there are two things that I love seeing with someone on their resume. I love seeing that either they've played team sports or they've worked their way through school. Both of those, while it was impactful for me, I think it teaches you discipline. It teaches you sacrifice. It teaches you how to work with a team. I think there's so many things that it teaches to a young person. And it was important to me, and I think it's been really apparent to me that it's proven to be successful in people we've hired.
Talk a little bit about because you're busy with sports, but you're also working as a kid too. I believe delivering newspapers and then your first real job.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about that work ethic that inherited. My dad worked 6 days a week, and my mother worked, and as I said, my grandparents worked. I think I just thought that was just natural. So in the 6th and 7th grade, I started selling grit newspapers. I don't know if they even exist
Now, what's
today.
a grit newspaper?
Wow. So it's a Southern-based newspaper. It's got a lot of stories. I mean, it has to do with the folklore and growing up in the South. And it was fairly prominent when I was a kid. And I don't know if they even exist today, but the papers would be delivered in a box to the home. I'd roll them up. I would get on my bicycle. I'd go down to the Kroger grocery store and I'd sell grit newspapers. And two things happened. One is I made money off of it. And second is I got tokens or points, and I would turn it in for baseball cards or baseballs or sport gear. And that was kind of a fun thing for me to do.
How old were you doing that?
Let's see, I would have been in the 12 to probably 13, 14 years old. And then somewhere along that time, Jimmy Carter was president.
Yeah.
And so Jack Carter was an attorney, Jimmy's brother. He lived in Calhoun. And going to church, some of the Secret Servicemen were attending our church, and they traveled all the time watching over Jack and Jimmy. And one of the things found out that they couldn't take care of their lawns. So I got this natural job of just hanging out with the Secret Service agents and being able to do their lawns. And so on the weekends, I got really busy doing lawns for the Secret Servicemen. And so that kind of took away the grit newspapers, and I made a lot more money.
I don't know if I've ever met anyone that does Secret Service lawns. Was there a background check for you?
No background check, but these guys were quite impressive. You would see the tearaway pants and the way they would hide their revolvers and things, and it was really cool to spend time with these guys. And one of them in particular, he was a marathon runner, so he got me into running as well. So I did some road races with those guys.
So you're growing up, you're involved in sports, you're working, and I imagine all of this is influencing you along the way too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I look back, and I don't know how my parents were able to kind of handle all of my activities, because if somebody said, "Well, do you want to do it?" It was yes, and I didn't ask them. So, but all of those things had an influence, and I think along the way, somewhere around my 8th grade year, I met a coach. His name was Coach Cooper, who had really taken interest in me, and he became somewhat of a mentor. My dad was very involved in my life. Wasn't as though my dad was not involved, but Coach Cooper took me under his wing, and he saw something in me, and he was really thinking maybe I could play some collegiate sports, and he was trying to develop me. But I remember in my 8th grade year, he said, for your elective, you're not going to have an elective. You're going to be my assistant. Well, I didn't know what that meant. That meant I hung out with Coach Cooper for one class every day, which means, I turned the sprinklers on in the ball field, and I cleaned up the locker room and cleaned up the ball field, but also went with him to school board meetings or leadership meetings. And so I was able to watch him in action, and he was a tough guy. He was a big man, but he was a gentle giant. And so I think a lot of that also helped in the influence of wanting to be more involved in sports. In fact, I would say at that age, I thought, I want to be a coach because
Yeah.
I can impact young kids' lives.
Sounds natural.
Yeah, it was. And it just probably somewhere along the way, and I would say along with Coach Cooper and others, there's probably some encouragement. If you want to make money, don't get into coaching. If you want to impact kids' lives, you want to get into coaching. So.
And speaking of money, your first real job, Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A was my first real job. And I'd say working in my uncle's men's clothing store might have been the first real. I don't even know if it showed up on Social Security report, but Chick-fil-A, I went to work at 15, and I spent about a year and a half at Chick-fil-A.
So again, you're working through high school. You mentioned Coach Cooper and the student body elections. You're eventually elected student body president.
Yeah, I was student body president. I don't know if there was a club involved. I was in it, and probably took on some sort of leadership role. Played about every sport there was. Ran track, wrestled, basketball, baseball, football, all these things. Again, I'm not sure how my parents kind of was able to get me around all these activities, especially with 2 other siblings that were very active. But yet they did it somehow, some way. But all of those things impacted me. And you could say the sports because of the team, the camaraderie side, some of the clubs and student body president helped me from a leadership side. And then there was a lot of academic engagement.
And speak a little bit of the academics, because I'm pretty confident you and I would never have been in the same classes.
That's probably not so right. You're extremely bright. In fact, I would say I was not the brightest kid in the classroom. I was always in kind of the top tier, but I think because all those activities, I was never great at any one thing. I was good at a lot of things, but I was never great at one thing.
Yeah. But that gave you the opportunity to be on the radar for some really great schools to go to.
Yeah, I was very fortunate when I came out. I'd gotten a lot of scholarships, had been accepted at Princeton and Georgia Tech. And I don't know, my parents really wanted me to go to Georgia Tech. And again, I talk about the humble beginnings. My parents were very involved in our lives, but it wasn't as though there was a college fund sitting there with my name on it. So, part of the conversation with my parents was, so you need to figure out how to pay for this thing. And I just could not figure out, like, the whole Ivy League thing, how that could be afforded. And so I don't know, plus in interviewing some of the Ivy League programs, I didn't find it as good a fit as maybe as what, in my upbringing. So along the path, I was working at an architectural firm. I think it sound like you should look at my resume. I bounced around a lot, but
what attracted you to architecture? That you were working at an architect? Was it the job that just happened to be available? Or?
Yeah, great question. So again, in high school, you talk about another kind of person stepping in your life. I had a teacher step in my life and said, "Hey, you ever thought about drafting?" And so I got involved in the drafting program. And so my summer between my sophomore and junior year, I was selected for Governor's Honors Program. And so I went away to college for a summer. And I was in their architectural program for a summer. And so that really inspired and invigorated me to give architecture a try.
And you do that, you're going to Dalton College, right, at the time?
Yeah, so I did the summer program. It was at North Georgia College. It was the Georgia Governor's Honors Program. Kind of side note, Jimmy Carter came back around. He was out of the office, but Amy Carter was there while I was there for that summer. There was 200 of us, and that was interesting.
You got a tie to the Secret Service that maybe you might be one.
Yeah, probably so. In fact, Jimmy and Roslyn would come there to visit Amy, and so it was always interesting. Got to see a couple of those Secret Service guys come back around that I had met when I was younger. So
that's pretty neat.
That was pretty neat. But architecture for me started getting in the blood, and so I started taking more classes in it in high school, and then I went to work for the firm, Kirkman Associates in Dalton. And Lowell Kirkman became, again, another guy with a mentor, probably accepted my life and really challenged me. Said, is this really what you want to do? Because to be an architect, you have to be really passionate. You're gonna work a lot of hours, a lot of weekends, and it's a lot of time alone. And I think you know me well enough, like I'm a little bit more social attraction. I love people, and so I couldn't picture myself as an architect, and so I got out of the architecture program and decided to move into engineering.
So when you decided that you're adult in college, you decided architecture's not for me. What's the process of looking for a new school? And I really want to know, how'd you get to Auburn?
Yeah, great question. In fact, if you look, I had gone to football camps at Georgia. I always thought I'd go to Georgia, to be honest, but I think they didn't have a real good architecture program, didn't have an engineering program. So Georgia Tech seemed to be the right place. But my best friend from college was playing football at Auburn. He was Bo Jackson's locker mate, which I think meant he took care of Bo's helmet and clothes and things for Bo. But I went down for a football weekend, and he was living with another football player who played wide receiver. And so I went down for a weekend, had the time of my life, and I figured out, I said, I got to figure out how to get to Auburn.
Yeah, and what attracted you to industrial engineering? I would imagine they're similar to architecture, but very different too.
Yeah, I think the industrial engineering, at least everything I read and every counselor I talked to said, you're going to have more engagement with people. You're going to be involved in the manufacturing plants. You're going to spend more time with people. You will do problem solving with people as opposed to singular problem solving by yourself.
You know, that's an interesting point of really your drive to want to be around people drove your career more than interest in, say, architecture than anything else.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think as a kid, you'd probably look at me and say I was in a bumper car that had a turbo engine, and thankfully it had some guardrails and bounced all over the place. But it was very linear. It was probably the first time in my life that probably hit some crossroads and said, I got to figure out which crossroads to go. And that engineering just seemed to fit, and certainly took me down a career path that I've been happy with.
But being with people was always important to you, and I imagine through Auburn that was the same.
Absolutely. And in fact, being at Auburn in the industrial engineering program, we did projects with some of the local manufacturing companies like Vermont American, and so we'd go into these plants, and I'd hang around with the guys that are operators of the machines and trying to figure out what they were doing, and just had some intellectual curiosity in the equipment, and I found out I liked hanging out with the people in the plant, and probably enjoyed that more than I enjoyed the schoolwork.
So you get through Auburn. What's next?
So when I came out of Auburn, it was a great time. Jobs were plentiful, and as I started interviewing, I was interviewing with companies that were all over the place, and so I was very fortunate. I had multiple job offers. One was an electronics company up in Milwaukee. It was a hospital company called Sun Health Systems down in Florida, and then there was a company, Sunoco Products. So anyway, I had about 4 or 5 different offers, and I started trying to figure out what did I want to do, because I wasn't so sure if I knew what I would do. Of course, I'm talking to my parents all the time about it. I was working at a men's clothing store at Auburn while I was going to school, and I was really undecided. But I knew I had to make a decision. Some of the companies had told me I need a commitment by Friday, and I remember a Thursday evening, I'm at work selling clothes, and the phone rings. And back in the day, there were no cell phones back then, Mike. I know.
Yeah, they were just starting.
So
you and I are the same age.
So, pick up the corded phone, and there's this man on the phone, and he says, "I need to speak to Brian Hunt." I says, "Yeah." He goes, I'm J.C. Rhodes. I'm the executive vice president of Sunoco Products, and I want to know what we need to do to get you here." And so here I'm at the clothing store trying to figure out. He said, "I called your home, and your roommate gave me this number." So. Well, in the conversation, I shared with him that my concern with Sunoco, a very large company, they were going to send me somewhere else in the world. I really wanted to live in the South. And his conversation, if I can commit you to the South, will you take the job? And I put a young man on the spot. I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, it's really tough. I don't know what to do. And I said, I hate to ask, but the other jobs offer more money too. And he said, and I said, but I need to talk to my dad. So anyway, took the job with Sunoco, and
where did they send you?
What's that?
Where did they send you?
So I started in South Carolina, then to North Carolina, and then the first big move was in Virginia. So they sent me to Virginia, what they still call the South, Sunoco.
It still qualifies. You're south of the Mason-Dixon line. So I know you mentioned another mentor, Al Harris, and I found something interesting that he told you in the move to Boston, sending you there to get cultured.
Yeah. So Sunoco, I think and I was on kind of upper career with Sunoco, and it was a great company. It was Fortune 250, I think, at the time. $1.7 billion company. And life was good. I mean, they were taking good care of me, giving me great opportunities.
And how old were you at this time?
So this would have been 24.
Wow, young
And
guy.
and yeah, so fairly young. And this mentor, Al Harris, he was assigned to me as a formal mentor. And I just think that I was given a great mentor who looked at me and said, I know you want to live in the South, but kid, you need to figure out what the world's like. And I remember he said to me, instead of moving you, there's an opening in Augusta, and I was hoping you moved to Augusta, Georgia. And he said, instead of sending you there, I'm going to send you somewhere where you can get cultured. I remember sending this off going, what does cultured mean?
Yeah.
He said, how many plays you ever been to? How many operas you ever been to? Like what things have you experienced outside of the South that you need to experience? And I said, I hadn't done much of that. He goes, well, we're getting ready to send you to Massachusetts because I think that's what you need to experience. And he was right. It was a good call. And he stayed a mentor, and he stayed very involved in my life for the 10 years of Sunoco. And I'd even say past that for my first 3 or 4 years as Southern champion.
So they send you to Massachusetts. What was that transition like for you? You're a young kid, son of the South, and all of a sudden you're in a place that gets cold.
Yeah, no, it got real cold. In fact, first winter, I think we had 100 inches of snow. So it was crazy. But I remember things that I would say with the leadership team there, and I had a really good operation. It was a union operation, and which was probably another thing that Al wanted me to experience. But I remember, like one of the first weeks, I was telling everybody, save on the light bill. I said, before you guys leave, I want you to cut the lights off. And I remember everybody, all the leadership looked at me going, cut the lights off? Like, what does that mean? And I said, why don't you cut the lights off? And they said, what are we cutting? Like, no, I want you to switch. Okay, switch the lights off. I mean, like everything that I would say, people would interpret it differently. And so certainly that helped me. It influenced me. It never got rid of my Southern dialect, but it influenced me.
What was the big learning experience from that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is that the whole worldly view, where you grow up, certainly you identify with things and you think you learn what is right and wrong. And so I certainly grew up in a conservative environment and I thought there was really one way of doing things. Really what I found out, there's really good people that think differently and act differently and speak differently. And it has certainly allowed me to really open up my views on people, especially running in a manufacturing operation. Again, it was a union operation, and they went on a strike at one time. But I remember when the strike happened, the shop steward, the union president, everybody, they showed up at my home. And, most people would say running a union operation, like you do not want that to happen.
Right.
Well, they came to my home and we sat out in the driveway and we talked about the issues at my home, and I never felt threatened about that. And so I think all of those things influenced me to try to figure out that, everyone's different, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong or right. We're just different, and you got to figure out how you manage when recognizing the differences.
That's such a great point. I think we're initially afraid of differences because they're different. But when you sit down and you talk to someone, and you realize we really pretty much have the same goals.
Absolutely, especially when that people have families, they have kids, they have
Right.
jobs, they got to pay the bills, they got all the same challenges that we have. They're just different challenges, and say that the experience with Sunoco helped me a lot, and it made me the leader who I am. And also, it really taught me something about being assertive. And I don't know, in the South, I remember early on, everything I would say would be please. And I remember, again, Al Harris would say, quit saying please, son. You got to quit saying that. Like you can't say everything please. Sometimes you just got to tell people what they need to do.
Yeah.
But don't turn around and say pretty please. Just like, let's get it done.
You're growing in Massachusetts. You're getting experience, but as a son of the South, you kind of want to get back. How's that all come about?
Yeah, I had it really the last year I was with Sunoco, we'd gone through a lot of changes. We'd shut down 2 facilities. I really had to go buy another building, which was really another great opportunity in life that a 27, 28-year-old kid does not get the opportunity to go buy a 300,000 square foot building along with a real estate person from corporate.
They put a lot of trust in you.
Oh, there's a ton of trust. And but along with that, I was doing that. We were putting a software program in. I was traveling a ton, and I did realize that I was missing my parents. I was really spending zero time at home. Was never never making it down to Georgia. But also, I was not the best husband and best father. So I think there's a part of me that says I need to get some work-life balance. It's very different than what people talk about today, work-life balance. But I truly was 70, 80 hours working 6 days and going in at 6 a.m., getting home at 8 p.m. And I think I really realized I need to do something different. I didn't need to work less, but I need to get a little more balanced. And so I updated my resume, didn't know what to do with it, but I just updated it and was kind of sitting on it, not sure what to do. And
So, so you had a faithful call from a friend?
yeah. So the guy that I referenced that played football, Mike Metcalf, he had been my best friend growing up, and when we left Auburn, he was living in Chattanooga, and he was doing banking business with the owners of Southern Champion. And in the middle, and this shows how God does amazing things, and it's hard to predict. But he's having lunch. They finish lunch, and Mike says to the owners, "What else can I do for you?" And if you know John Zeiser, John's a comedian in some respects, and John says, "Yeah, find me a general manager." And Mike says, "Okay, what are you looking for?" He goes, "I'm only kidding. Like, I need somebody in the paper business. You're a banker. Like, I'm sorry, I was just kidding, but we're getting frustrated. We can't find somebody." Mike says, "Well, my college roommate's in the paper business." And he says, "No, somebody needs no converting." He goes, "That's what he does, I think." And so anyway, my college roommate called. I'd updated my resume 3 weeks prior to that, and hence I ended up coming down to Chattanooga.
How difficult a decision is that for someone who's in late 20s, early 30s, working Fortune 250 company, really on a track
Yep.
to lead a big company like that, that you're so attracted back to the South that it's a good sized family business.
Yeah, there is no way I can explain it other than there was a place where God set His hand on me and said, "This is what you need to do," and I truly believe that because I really didn't know what to do. I was having a great time with the company. It wasn't that I hated the company. I just was kind of struggling with where I was in life. So when I came down to interview with Sunoco, spent time, I just saw this family focused environment, great culture. And it just seemed like it was an opportunity for me to join a place that I would fit, and I would fit really, really well. The challenge that I had is the division I was running was larger than Southern Champion. And by the way, the plant they wanted me to come run was the smallest of all of their entities, and every plant that I had ran in Sunoco was larger than it. So none of it made sense to me of how that came about, other than there was just this kind of hand on me that says, "This is something you need to try." And I'll be honest, when I came down, I thought it'd be a 2 to 3 year move. I've been living here for 2 to 3 years. And I thought, well, come down for 2 or 3 years and we'll see what happens. And I've been here 26 years.
Was it difficult for the Zeisers to get your attention? Because to your point, you were running a division that was larger than what you were being asked to come do down here.
Yeah, there is nothing that can explain it other than certainly I felt like I need to spend some time with my parents. I was trying to save a marriage that was struggling. Daughter had gone off to college, so it was a really great time to be able to make a move. And I think in that, it was just really a leap of faith. And I remember that we'd had a family meeting, not before, I basically said, "I'm going to turn this thing down." I remember coming out of the shower, and I know it sounds weird, but I pray in the shower, and I certainly got out of the shower and was like, "I think I need to take this gig." And so it was just an epiphany that occurred, and I haven't regretted it at any point in my career. Obviously, I've been here for 26 years.
When you decide to take it and when you get here, what about the culture, and I'd like you to talk more about the overall Southern Champion culture, because you're coming up on 100 years in business, but you only know so much when you're interviewing. What was it when you got here that you said, "I think I found a home"?
Yeah, a couple of things happened. One is I remember sitting across the table from a guy named George Coogan, who was our director of sales at the time. George's still with us. He's our chief strategy officer. Sat across the table with George, and we talked about team sports, and we talked about crazy mischief that we had gotten into when we were younger. And I just found out, like, wow, this guy had a similar upbringing to me, and he had worked his whole life, and he was committed to the company. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty interesting guy that I could turn around and create a good partnership with. And then you had the owners who really talked about what it is about developing people. and about stewarding the resources, they were not sitting talking about how do we make more money? How do we line our pockets? How do we go buy bigger boats? It was nothing like that. It was about how do we reinvest in the business? And I thought the reinvestment idea, like I was really questioning, do you really reinvest? And they spent a fair amount of time showing the books to me and saying, look, we reinvest the profits. And by the way, we tithe the profits to the community. And that to me really struck it home as the way I was brought up, and how do you reinvest the money that you earn? And then how do you tithe something in the community? And so it really resonated with an upbringing. And so that's really what kind of connected me in the early days.
Talk about the culture a little bit. I know you talked about, really four things: a servant heart, relational, resourceful, trustworthy. Why was that important to you, and how is that still so important today in the culture at SET?
Yeah, so we have four values, and they're on the wall. It's and they're just not on the wall. I would say they are. I tell people I think of them as not just they're woven into the fabric; they're woven into the threads that make the fabric, and it's really about just how we're created. And the first one being servant-hearted, which is really the thought process is we ought to serve everyone in love. Like everything that we do, that's what we ought to think about. In fact, that's if I would say there's a mantra that I have lived by throughout most of my life, it is that whole knowing that it's a privilege every day to wake up and take advantage of serving people every single day. And so kind of my thought process always been is when I'm going to the office, who can I serve today? What is it I can serve? Is it a customer? Is it a supplier? Is it an employee? And so that servant hearted, that really meshed really well with the way that I looked at life. The second being resourceful. And resourceful is just being able to, how do you steward the resources that you've been given, whether it be finances or talents or equipment. The relational aspect, I think we talked a bit about kind of the way that I view the importance of having people in your lives and kind of the societal connections. And then the trustworthy aspect, that the golden rule, the fact that your word is your bond, and when you shake someone's hand, it means something. Those are all things that I'd grown up with, and it aligned well. So the four values, while I didn't have four values listed in my life on paper, I could substitute those and put those on paper and believe in them.
Well, and I imagine if you walk through Southern Champion Tray, those are on the wall somewhere. But beyond them being present and physically, how do you go about integrating that into the associates you work with? What is the everyday thing that happens at SET that makes it successful?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And there's a lot of people that could probably answer it better than I. But I can tell you what I see and what I'm aware of that works and what works well. And I'll tell you first, it starts when we orient people. So the new employee orientation process, there is some paperwork and things involved, but that process is really about engaging that employee into the fabric of community. So every new employee group that comes in, there's a community engagement piece. They have to go serve in the community. And so whether it be serving food for homeless or working at Room at the Inn or being involved with the United Way Project, everybody that comes to work for us, that is something that we start off with, because we want to ingrain that into who they are. We want them to know who we are. We want it to be a part of their life. The other thing that happens in the new employee orientation is leaders come speak to the group. And they don't come speak just to say, hey, welcome, thank you, and move on. They really talk about things that's on your heart. And one of the things I've talked to people about is having an open door policy, which truly means when we're walking the operation, we want people to stop and talk to us. We want to be engaged in their lives. And if they ever have an issue, they can go to the person above them, and they can continue to go. And if they want to come to see me, they can certainly come see me. They have an open door. So there's things that we talk about. We bring in outside speakers. And so all of that in the new employee orientation, I think, is really, we want to get them off to the right start.
Yesterday, your chief people officer, Ralph Romero, was talking about skip days.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it was something that was organically generated based on your culture.
Yeah, and it's tough for me to get emotional in this, because this young man, and I say young man, he was in his 50s when he passed, but he was as much a friend as anything. But one of the most highly talented human beings you've ever seen. He could do anything. Secondly, he was ranked in the world in doing triathlons, exterior, which was off-road triathlons, and he was ranked in the world. I think he finished second in his 50s. So this guy who worked for us ended up coming down with colon cancer. And what found out in conversations with him is he had not done his colon screen, and he had just had to avoid it in life, and ended up taking his life. And he was highly connected in our company, and he was a friend of all. He was a little bit of a curmudgeon. He would point out all the problems, but he was also a guy that would go fix them. Well, after Skipper passed away, kind of there's been this void a little bit within the company. And one thing that happened within our wellness director and our people team, they said, we need to figure out how we can help in the colon cancer challenge. And there's some data points we got, and we found out that only 8% of our employees are having colon screens when the national average is in the 60%. So what they came up with is this idea of a skip day in honor of Skipper. And that is that any employee that chooses to go get colon screen, they can do it. And it does not go against them with points. They don't have to take a vacation day. And it's paid for by the company. And we put that in. The first week we put it in, we had one employee that took us up on it right immediately, had not gotten their screening, and decided to go get their screening.
What an important thing to do. It's not only selfless on the company's part, but it helps maintain a healthy workforce too, as an ancillary benefit.
But it maintains a healthy workforce, but also, you think about all these people have families. So,
Yeah.
And the families are dependent upon the wages. They're dependent upon that the people are able to go to work every day. And so it's just one simple way that we can be involved in people's lives. And, other things that we do. We have a physician assistant on site. And so she's able to write scripts and deal with episodic care or help people with conditions. And I don't know how many employees have dealt with type 2 diabetes or emphysema or something that's been a nagging condition, and they have chosen not to go to a doctor over the years. Now we got a physician assistant. It's free. They go see them, and they can get treatment at site. And they don't have to miss time from work, and it's paid for. And we got a wellness director who can help people if you're dealing with kind of some physical challenges. We have a counselor that's on site, comes on in Chattanooga every Tuesday and deals with family issues or things that are involved with marital or raising kids or generational differences and how to deal with parents, aging parents. And so the counselor is available and it's free of charge. So all these things, I think, help make the culture what it is at Southern Champion.
I know we're limited on time today, so I want to get to a couple more things. Talk a little bit about your view on personal view on leadership.
Yeah, I spoke earlier about the privilege to serve, and I do think that every day you're given an opportunity to serve, and I really think that if we can have all of our employees think about that through those lenses, especially on the leadership side, it could be tremendously important, and it could be long sustaining for the organization. So one of the things that we challenge leaders is that, or I would like to that I challenge my leaders is that I want you to develop everybody in your organizations if you're not there. So spend time looking at succession, looking at who you hire, and try to identify how do you set this to be a sustaining organization. If it relies on me just to make decisions, the company's going to be very short-lived. But if you've got people that are multi-deep within the organization, that's certainly important. A philosophy that I have about customers, customers are extremely important. We all know that. But there's a lot of times you end up with this challenge of what's right and what's wrong from a customer standpoint. So in other words, if you're looking at quality, was it good or is it not? Or if I told the customer to get this product, did I really commit or did I not commit? And one of the things that I really challenge the team is that if you have to guess, if you're trying to guess, should I make this decision based on the company or the customer? Guess on behalf of the customer. And that has served me well historically. I won't say we always get it right, but I think it's an important mantra to live by.
I like the way you put that. Guess on the side of the customer, because you'll never go wrong with the customer.
Yeah, and it may cost the company, but I do. It's that whole going back to your words, your bond. I mean, if you've committed to something, if you've committed to supply the customer a good product, you need to supply the customer a good product, and it's on us to do that. And those are a couple of things. I also, we talked with our team about assertive communication, and I really believe that being assertive in communication is very important. And I think in the process that sometimes we have to deal with chronic poor performers. I don't mean the occasional mistake. I'm talking about the chronic poor performers. And this is my personal view, is that there's one of two things that causes that. And it's either attitudinal or it's ability. And I think there's solutions to both. Very different solutions. But we should not tolerate chronic poor performers. That we can fix those. We just got to identify what's the cause and then determine what's the correct path.
You have a great quote that I pulled out. The best developed teams can overcome a weak strategy. Poorly developed teams have little chance of executing a wonderful strategy.
Yeah, and I just firmly believe that. So if you've got I've seen it happen way too often. You've got a great strategy, the team's not developed, and they just underperform. But I've seen really poor strategies where teams have been able to overachieve because it's a great team. And I've referenced historically to people that the 1972 Dolphins is a great example. If you go back and look, and for those of you that are historical sport nuts, you could go back and look at the data. You had a backup quarterback through most of the season. You had a no-name defense. I didn't use that. Tom Landry's one actually turned to the no-name defense. But you had a coaching staff that loved developing people. They went undefeated. It's the only team that's ever gone undefeated in the NFL. But if you go back and look at the history of that, I mean, that was a well-developed team that just came together and created something that has never been done in sports and in the NFL.
Yeah, the sum was greater than the parts.
That's exactly right.
Before I get to the last question, I do need to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. It's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media, learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, Brian, last question. It's my standard last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old Brian Hunt is important for a happy life?
Wow, that goes deep into the soul when you start asking about a happy life. I do think there's a few things that I've learned along the way that I did not realize how to take advantage of it back in the time. And one is that mentorship thing that I referenced earlier. That I knew those people were impactful in my life, but I probably didn't take full advantage of it as I should. And so I would love to be able to go back into those situations with those mentors and be able to sit with them first and thank them for what they've done, but then also figure out how I could learn more and do better from what they've done. In fact, I talked about that Henry Cooper earlier, and one of the things that he gave me when I graduated high school is a plaque that says, "You've got to pay the price." That plaque sits on my desk today, 40 years later.
Wow.
Which is just amazing. It's probably the only thing I have from high school, but 40 years later, plaque sits on my desk, "You've got to pay the price." And so I think that in everything that I have done, when I've had self-pity or doubt, I've used that plaque as a reminder that, not everything's going to come easy. And sometimes you got to pay a price to find the joy. But that's okay. That temporary price that you pay, there's joy on the other side of that. And that's been a little bit of a mantra that I've lived by. And certainly I'd love to go back to some of those mentors and thank them for the impact they've had on my life.
Well, they obviously had a big impact on you, and you brought those lessons forward. I appreciate you sharing them with us. And I can't think of a better person to do this with at the Global Leadership Summit than you. You really hit all the boxes.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been a joy today, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.